Just a moment. I'm not sure if this is on either. I don't think this is on, Tom. Can you all hear me? Yes, okay. Good afternoon and welcome everyone. We welcome all of our Rotarians, both here and on Zoom, and all of their guests. Today is it the 25th, 26th of October, and we are the Rotary Club of Gainesville. So again, welcome. So guests and visiting Rotarians who are joining us on Zoom, please identify yourself in the chat. And if you're watching us on YouTube, please register your participation by sending an email to info@rotarygainesville.org. I believe Pete is not with us today, and Tom is going to help us with our song and pledge. Tom Klett.
I'm so glad I could fill in for Pete. Today we'll sing God Bless America. Are you ready? God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with a light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home. Now join me in pledging allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Tom. We enjoy your beautiful voice. And Eric Spivey is here with us today for our invocation. Eric?
Will you join me with me in prayer? Oh Lord, today we come remembering our community as we prepare to celebrate Halloween for the first time in 2 years. And so, Lord, we pray for our community and as our community leaders that we will have a time that is fun, safe, and a spirit of community that builds within all of Alachua County in Gainesville. Lord, we also remember that Halloween began as a preparation for All Saints' Day, a day to remember those saints among us who have passed away. And so today, as a club, we pause for a moment after a year of so much grief and sickness and death to remember the saints in our own lives, family members and friends and colleagues and club members who have passed away over the last year. O Lord, may these saints, the gift of your love into our lives, may it continue to live inside of us as we go on, O Lord, to put service above self this year. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you so much, Eric. That was beautiful. You may be seated unless you are a visiting Rotarian or a guest. And at this time, we will introduce those visiting our club. I actually have a guest, so I'm going to go ahead and go first, if I may. I have Chris Floyd with Inside Insurance joining us today. Welcome, Chris.
We have a guest. We have a guest on Zoom. He's a guest of Captain Sheed Tarnew. It's Bill Stack. He's with the Seminole County South Rotary. He's Youth Services and Interact Chair. So if you'll welcome Bill Stack.
All right, welcome. Any other visiting Rotarians or guests? Okay, if not, we'll move right into our announcements by Rotarians. I believe on Zoom, do we have Frank Mason with us to talk about ethics in business?
Yes, good morning. I'm here. Can you hear me? Hello? Anybody? Can you guys hear me? If you guys wave, I can tell you you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes, we can hear you.
So I am a part of the Ethics and Business Committee and just want to chat a little bit about that award. The Ethics and Business Award is done in conjunction with the Greater Gainesville Chamber of Commerce and has been presented annually since 2011. The award honors and recognizes individuals and businesses in the community that exemplify the ideals of Rotary and consistently demonstrate strong commitment to the highest ethical practices in all facets of their business. I want to encourage everyone to consider a nomination. The strength of the award is a result of the strength of the nominees. Please consider within your network who might be an appropriate person to nominate. You can obtain a nomination form from DACDB or by contacting our committee chair, Scott Winsler. All club members are encouraged to make nominations, but anyone can make a nomination. Club membership is not a requirement. We welcome you to invite others in your businesses to consider making a nomination. The deadline for submission is next Friday, November 5th. The nominees will then be interviewed by a team of student ethics ambassadors from the Warrington School of Business at UF, who will make a recommendation to the committee, and the committee will make a final selection of the award recipient. The award will then be announced in January 2022. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to any of the committee members or Scott Winsler, and you can also submit your nominations there.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Frank. We appreciate it. John Gregory. Oh, sorry. Okay, I better get out of the way here.
This poem is called Halloween Brew. Dracula had been up all of the night. He was thirsting for something just right. He'd just have to get a tall one, you bet. He just wanted a cool Blood Light. She wanted to dress up like a genie, or maybe a gangster, a meanie. Could pretend like she's glued, or dress up as some food, like an empty hot dog, a Halloweenie. For Halloween at school, our class would dress crazily and be so crass. Which hats we'd wear, and with chains we'd scare. Halloween's the fright before Christmas. The witch was really quite rich, had twins, and made others itch. See, other witches weren't well, since they couldn't tell specifically which witch was which. Happy Halloween.
Thank you very much, John. That was great. All right. We have a craft talk today. Mike Conroy, would you like to please come up and introduce your craft talk?
Good afternoon, Rotarians. That's a nearly impossible thing to follow up. At any rate, I'd like to introduce a fellow today, Michael Pellet, whom I first brought to this group and sponsored in 2005. He became a Rotarian for quite a few years until his business and professional life caught up with him and he got involved in other things. He is back to join us again. Michael is an active practicing architect.
I wanted to go back to the land and I wanted to be self-sufficient. We were in our energy crisis then. Gas lines were down the block. OPEC was a big name in the news. And it was suggested to me that I could have an impact by being an architect on buildings. So I went to a community college. And between then and now, that's 45 years that I've been working in the field of architecture. And I thoroughly enjoy it. And now that I went into it to do energy conservation in buildings. Now it's called green architecture. Back then it wasn't, it was just passive architecture and things like that were the terms. I realized that now that I've gotten to get the Social Security and I can do semi-retirement, why not go back to that goal that I started with and just concentrate on energy efficiency and providing that kind of a service to people in the community. And so here I am. That's my goal over the next little while. I don't care to travel out of town again. Owner, you know, small business, and I've done a lot of churches and I've done a lot of restaurants and bars and a lot of homes. And I particularly find my love is in finding a way to solve your existing building and not spend more money on building something new and perhaps have the risk of getting Chinese drywall again or something like that. So here I am. Let's.
What I think was a brief hiatus. What, Michael, just a year or two, really, I think you were gone. It feels like 6. Well, I've been running into you other places. Well, anyway, I'm glad you're back, and I've got your Rotary 4-way test plaque right over here. I'd like for you to come up. Let me give that to you, please. So everybody, congratulations, Michael Pellet, on your craft talk and great new member. Okay, guys, I've just got a couple of kind of brief points of business announcements. We've got a wonderful program today. Dr. Angelini got a little sneak preview of her PowerPoint and a lot of words that I don't know in there, so I'm looking forward to this. Richard Allen asked me to just kind of remind everybody of our international auction coming up on the 30th of November. So we're kind of at the stage right now where we're looking for auction items. So if you or anyone you know has things like vacation homes, kind of the big ticket items is really what makes this thing go. But really any type of auction items that you would be willing to donate or that you have some contacts that might donate. A reminder that our recipient this year is Sustainable Cambodia. And the other thing I just wanted to quickly mention, just a reminder that we have our Flamingo celebration and Vibrant Club seminar. I know that you guys get some of these emails, but I don't know if you necessarily pay them as close attention as I do. Just want to make sure you're aware of this. This is coming up on the November 5th, 6th, and 7th weekend. And this is kind of cool because this is actually the first time that we're going to be getting together as a district in a long time. So it's I'm told that Saturday evening affair is going to be a lot of fun, and you know, we've got some good breakout sessions, kind of some educational stuff during the day. So you know, we really want to get a good showing there, and it'll be a good weekend over there in the St. Augustine World Golf Hall of Fame. And with that, folks, again, welcome everyone via Zoom too. Thank you, Frank Mason, for doing that announcement via Zoom. I'm going to now ask my friend Susan Crowley to please come up and introduce our program.
I'm very happy today to introduce to you Christine Angelini. She is an associate professor in the Environmental and Engineering Sciences and director of the Center for Coastal Solutions. She received her PhD in biology from the University of Florida in 2014 and her BS in marine biology from Brown University in 2009. She is an ecologist with expertise in wetland, reef, and dune systems. Her research focuses on advancing understanding of mechanisms that control ecosystem resilience to climate change and influence contaminant integration into coastal food webs. She has many awards and distinctions, including receiving the NSF Career Award in 2016. She was selected as a National Academy of Sciences Early Career Gulf Coast Research Fellow, and she received the UF College of Engineering Faculty Leadership Award. Please welcome Dr. Angelini.
All right. Let's see if you can load my talk. That would be great. Looks like this is on. Wonderful. Thank you, Susan, for the introduction, and thank you all for taking some time today to hear about the center that I'm the director of here at the University of Florida. I want to kind of start my talk with having everyone sort of transport yourself to your favorite coastal location as a place of sort of, you know, kind of putting you in the right mindset of hearing what I'm going to talk about and thinking about how much that means to you. And so I'm an ecologist, as Susan mentioned. What I do is a lot of field work out in our coastal waterways. And I'm really motivated to lead this center here at the University of Florida, partly because I want my children to be able to enjoy the experiences that I have on our coastal beaches and our coastal waterways fishing that are really kind of a part of the fabric of who I am, but are also really important to the fabric of the state of Florida. And we have many sort of connections to the coast here in Gainesville as a result of what's happening on our coastline is affecting where people are living in our state and actually driving people to come to our community because of our changing coastline and its uncertain future. So yeah, I'm really happy today to be telling you about this new center we have here at the university, and really the context for kind of getting this center off the ground is that the University of Florida and leadership realized, particularly in 2018, when we had kind of raging red tide blooms going on in the west coast of Florida and blue-green algae blooms occurring in the Indian River Lagoon, that our waterways, particularly on the coast of our state, are under sort of siege. And what we're seeing is a sort of a variety of different types of hazards in our coastal waterways. This is ranging from things like harmful algae blooms, such as red tide, outbreaks of pathogens that are coming from septic and sewer water and industrial sort of pollutants, as well as things like macroalgae blooms. So some of you may have walked along the beaches and seen a lot more accumulated seaweed on our beaches. And these aren't sort of natural necessarily events, but sort of a symptomatic of a coastline in our state that's relatively sick. And what we know as scientists is that these biological events and other different types of sort of water quality hazards are generally unpredictable. We don't know when they're going to form, we don't know how long they're going to last, and we don't know when they're going to end and why. But in general, many of them are increasing in frequency and severity for two reasons. One is climate change, and the other is that the state of Florida continues to grow like gangbusters. We're still adding 1,000 new people every day, And those increase in number of people on our landscape is changing basically the delivery of fresh water and what is in that water as it goes to our coastline. So we know these coastal hazards are sort of on the rise. And as a state with a lot of coastline, 8,000 miles of coastline, Florida is a state where this is kind of hitting us from all sides. And what we know is that the consequences of these water quality hazards are spanning all different types of sort of elements of our life in our environment. As an example, we're seeing sort of a proliferation of unhealthy or even dead ecosystems on our coast. The picture here in the upper left here is one of the oyster reefs that I work on in Cedar Key, Florida. And just 20 years ago, this was a live, vibrant reef and now has about 5% cover of live living oysters. So this is a sort of in our backyard and one of our coastal ecosystems that's suffering because of changes in the health and condition of our coastal waterways. But we're also seeing changes in the quality of life and in public health here in the state. So when our residents want to go to the beach, but they can't because there's too much respiratory irritation provoked by red tide, this is really affecting the sort of the experience we have as Floridian, but also the experiences of tourism and tourists that come to our state and want to sort of recreate in our kind of coastal landscape. And as a result of this, we're seeing a lot of economic uncertainty and sort of episodes of kind of revenue loss, and whether this is coming from losses in Airbnb rentals during red tide events or changes in fisheries, it's starting to hurt us here in the state in our pocketbook as well. So what's being done about this? So on a sort of from a local to a state to a federal level, we are investing a lot in monitoring our coastal systems and our coastal waterways. So this is ranging from everything from satellites that are, circulating the earth and collecting really high resolution imagery of, say, the surface temperature of our coastal waterways. But we also have local efforts like those that are being led by Moat Marine Lab and the University of South Florida, where researchers are out in the water collecting water samples and really trying to detect with sort of unprecedented sort of resolution what's happening in our coastal systems. And we're investing a lot in what we do with that data in terms of aggregating it into clean and reliable databases. And so these are just some of the different examples that are being produced by state agencies here in Florida and regional agencies coming from the government level. So we're trying to basically integrate this data into something that into more usable forms. But the question might be sort of, are these current, where we are today, enough to begin sort of informing more sort of productive disaster responses, as well as creating long-term solutions that allow us to have a more sustainable coastline here in the state of Florida and really maintain our coast as our state's greatest asset rather than one of its greatest liabilities. And what I would say is that we're not there yet. Right now, we have access to lots of information, but we don't have useful, actionable information about what to do about the coastline. So I'm going to give you an example of what this is looking like in my life as a scientist that works on these issues. Some of you, how many of you remember or have any familiarity with what happened at Piney Point in Tampa Bay? All right, just a few folks. So I'm going to give you an overview of this. So earlier this year, in April of this year, there was basically these phosphogypsum stacks, which don't worry about what that means. What this is in these ponds are nutrient-rich water that are sort of wastewater coming from phosphate mining, which is a really productive industry here in the state of Florida. And what happened was that the pond liners of one of these stacks, which was containing this wastewater, sprung a leak. And so the state had to sort of, respond to this emergency because they had a choice of either draining the ponds and dumping the discharges into Tampa Bay, or potentially having the ponds fail and flood nearby communities. And so what the state decided to do was to discharge this nutrient-rich wastewater into Tampa Bay. And what was unknown was what is going to be the environmental response? What is going to happen to Tampa Bay? And mind you, Tampa is a location where after 25 years of effort to clean up Tampa Bay, finally they were seeing successes where the seagrasses were coming back, the fisheries were coming back. In the state of Florida, Tampa Bay has been an environmental success story. So this is really alarming, especially to those environmental groups and local community leaders who have really taken charge in sort of improving Tampa Bay, that, oh my gosh, now we have, this spill of nutrient-rich water. What is going to be the fate for this system? And so here's what I was in the sort of situation room, if you will, on deciding what is going to be the environmental response and how should we go about tracking this and addressing it in Tampa Bay. So if you were in one of these meetings, here's some of the information that we had. So we had information about what was the sort of chemically in the water, where were the nutrients, and this was being collected by the Department of Environmental Protection. And then we would scroll over to a new window, and this was satellite data that was being produced by the National Oceanographic Atmospheric Organization, or NOAA, essentially one of our federal agencies. And what you can see in this picture is sort of a bloom of dark green water here. And what that is high levels of chlorophyll or high levels of phytoplankton in the water. So we could tell that there was kind of a response in the water column in terms of the color of the water near Piney Point. And then we skip over to a new window, which was what are the local red tide counts? So is there any evidence that we have harmful algae in the water that is toxic to humans and wildlife? And where is that relative to Piney Point? And then finally, we'd open another window, which was essentially this is a model that shows the circulation of water throughout Tampa Bay. And it's showing the distribution of water as it sloshes in and out with the tides through the system. And what we were forced to do as a kind of community of experts is understand how do we integrate across all of these different sources of information to forecast and project what's going to happen next and what we should do in terms of emergency response. And what I can very briefly tell you is that even for those that are experts in these areas, trying to integrate information across all these different platforms is exceptionally difficult to do. And so what I would say is that even though we had plenty of information, we didn't have intelligence about how to make decisions. So in essence, we have oceans of data, but trickles of insight. And that's where I think we continue to be today about how to sort of proactively address these environmental issues and many other environmental issues where we're dealing with very complex systems. So this is really where the Center for Coastal Solutions really comes in. We're really trying to kind of fill a unique niche in the state of Florida in integrating across 3 different areas. First and foremost, we're trying to achieve major advances in how we analyze the data that we have at our fingertips, including using the use of artificial intelligence to do that. But we don't want to be analyzing data in a vacuum. It really needs to be informed by folks that are real experts in coastal dynamics. And so we're coupling the big data sort of analytics with world-class expertise. And finally, we need to be able to translate that information into actions and solutions. So we need to know how to better manage our systems, where to invest in different types of infrastructure, like where do we convert septic to sewer, and do that strategically. So we'll see major improvements downstream. And we also need to change policy here in the state, but we really need this kind of in an integrated ecosystem. So this is the vision of our center, is to kind of fill these major sort of needs. And as I said, it's called the Center for Coastal Solutions. And we were formally started just a year ago in October of 2020 here at the University of Florida. And what our mission of our center is to provide our state and use our state as a kind of an example for the broader region and nation for how to provide real-time and predictive intelligence that's critical to improving the condition and health of our coastal waterways. You know, we want these type of experiences that we get to have in our coastal systems to be something that our children experience in the future. So how are we going to do this? What is the sort of our impact spaces? I would say we're a very sort of, sorry, I think I went ahead one too many. Hold on one second. Oops, okay, I must have deleted one of my slides. So what we're working on is creating a sort of a suite of different types of what we're calling intelligence products. This is what the University of Florida is going to be producing for the general public, for state agency and local agency sort of decision makers. And so what we're really sort of advancing technology to do is to better see the hazards that are in our coastal waterways by creating real-time 3D mapping of sort of what's going to happen in the future and what has happened in the past in our coastal systems by ingesting data from all of these different sources. We're working on anticipating the future, so running sort of models that allow us to forecast both over the short term and over sort of the decadal scale to sort of inform what types of decisions we should make. We are bringing in our world-class expertise to really fundamentally understand the problem So not just use data analytics, but to really sort of bring in experts that understand these hazards from a fundamental level, so that we can really understand, why a harmful algae bloom event forms in the first place, what causes it to sort of end, and what are those kind of controlling factors. We're working on exploring solutions, and so probing what types of responses we should be investing in, and guiding our sort of decision makers to invest in to actually improve the condition of our waterways, and then working hand in hand with these partners to actually implement those solutions. So this is really kind of the impact space that we're working to step into. And we've actually gotten started with building our kind of technology ecosystem. We're working primarily right now in Southwest Florida. So for a point of reference, this is Fort Myers, Florida. And this is a particularly important location here in the state for the Center for Coastal Solutions to be working, because this is one of our waterways that is chronically affected by different water quality challenges. So this is a region that regularly is experiencing red tide blooms. They're also experiencing blue-green algae blooms, macroalgae blooms. Essentially any given day of the week or month of the year, there's a different types of water quality hazard that's being experienced in this region of the state. But really, what are the key factors that control the formation of those hazards really remain unresolved. And so this region is has its hands tied, and that they don't know which areas to invest in to really improve conditions across this broader and economically very important system. So we're really working on building basically our technology ecosystem to support this broader region. And already we've been sort of ingesting all of the environmental data that we can get our hands on for this broader region. And we're working with a data analytics company called SAS. So through a really productive public-private partnership to build a data intake pipeline. We're already building our sort of Earth system model that allows us to simulate flows from the Caloosahatchee and the ocean and how they mix in these waterways. That's producing 3D maps, allowing us to rewind in time and forecast in the future what's going to happen in our coastal systems. And we're already working on policy guidance as well. So we're working with the cities of Sanibel and Captiva and Lee County to work on different types of policy actions they can undertake to improve the condition of their waterway. So even in the last year, we've really gotten to work. So you might ask, why the University of Florida? We're based in Gainesville, which is not a coastal location, but why would we be the institution that would work on coastal solutions? And I would say there's a couple of key reasons. First and foremost, UF has the best technology for this type of work in the state of Florida. We now have the second fastest supercomputer in higher education that just kind of came on board over the last year. It's called the NVIDIA UF Hypergator AI. And this is particularly well suited for doing all the high powered data analytics that we're trying to strive for in our program. So we have the supercomputing power that none of our competitors in the state have. We also have the world-class expertise in both artificial intelligence and data analytics, but in all of the other disciplines that we need, from economics to public health to oceanography, to really make this ecosystem work. And we're all co-located here in Gainesville. We've also had fabulous commitment from the highest level of administration. I mentioned earlier that the provost in 2018 really got behind this initiative and put his money where his mouth was, and really kickstarted this with a $750,000 investment. And that type of commitment and investment from the university has maintained through this day. I think they realize this is a really important area of focus. And finally, we're in an ecosystem where we have a lot of support for developing the types of public-private partnerships where we need to not only accelerate the technology development, but to also be impactful from a local to a state and a national level. So as an example, these are some of the different partners that come from the NGO space, from the private sector space, from the federal government, that are working with us on either collecting data, building our data intake system, helping us run our Earth system models, or helping us kind of take the science that we're producing and translate it into actionable solutions for local communities. So this is really a place where such public-private partnerships are really sort of encouraged and championed. All right, let's see, what else do I have? I'm almost done. All right, so how could you sort of join us in becoming a part of the solution? We're really working right now on sort of spinning up some of our fundraising efforts and figuring out how do we work with a broader network of different types of stakeholders and partners in getting this kind of effort off the ground. So we're really looking to engage a variety of corporate sponsors, philanthropic sponsors, other types of, and those from a government space as well, and helping us catalyze our research. We have kind of big vision for what we want to do. There's a lot of work to be done, but we're looking for partners that can help us accelerate the pace of technology innovation and scientific discovery. Student training is a critical part of what we do at the University of Florida. All the work that you're seeing today is co-produced by faculty, staff, and students. And so opportunities for student engagement, and we really feel like we're training the next generation to work day in and day out in this space. We really want to continue to strengthen our team, and whether that's by partnering with us or helping us kind of recruit and retain awesome faculty. And possibly some of the way that you could be engaging with us is helping us amplify our impact. How do we better communicate? As you can tell, I'm a moderate communicator, not an excellent one with the general public. And we really need help with messaging and getting the word out about what we're doing, so that not only are folks aware of what we're doing, but they're also willing to adopt the science and the products that we produce over time. And finally, as I mentioned, we're really eager for different types of partnership opportunities. So with that, I'll leave it here. Just know that there's, this organization is in your community, and I'm always open to different creative ideas of working together with different people. And I really appreciate your attention and time, and I'm happy to take some questions. Thank you.
If you have a question, please raise your hand, and Don Bugos will bring you the microphone. If you're on Zoom, please type your questions into chat. Thank you. State your name and your question, please.
John Gregory. I'm wondering, please, we have a septic tank, and it makes different freshwater problem. Now, you haven't said anything at all about freshwater coming into the sea.
Yes. So basically, our coast is what is the ultimate toilet or receptacle of what happens upstream and in our watersheds, right? So actually, thinking about what happens in people's septic tanks in their yards is a really big, important part, because ultimately things drain to our coast, right? So we have a big focus right now, and actually in discussions with DEP about how do we help them prioritize which locations they really need to take off of septic and transmit to sewer. So there's, I think in the case of your individual home, it's really useful to have an understanding of how close your septic tank is to the groundwater, how close you are to different types of surface waters, whether that's little streams or rivers or other sort of bodies of surface water, to know whether your septic is basically one that, you should be encouraging your, local community to try to go towards sewer. But those types of guidance is exactly the types of decisions that at a state level, Florida is facing, is where do we need to kind of prioritize that type of septic to sewer conversion. Yep.
Christine, Ed, Ellett, and two questions for you. My wife and I returned from a long weekend over at Steenhatchee last weekend, and enjoyed it very much. Had some good fishing, but we did see some patchy fish kill that was there. And I'm just curious. I know y'all are aware of that, and I know it's been occurring off Swanee and Cedar Key. And when you hear that, is there a source that tests the fish to find out specifically, is that red tide? Is it water with all the rain coming out of Swanee River and, some pollutants coming out? Or
Sure.
That's question one.
There's basically there is a diagnostic way to know whether the fish died because of what's called brevetoxin, and that's produced by what creates red tide, which is a dinoflagellate. Don't worry about what that is. It's a microscopic animal that lives in the water that produces basically toxins that if they're ingested, they can kill fish, and they can also, it's what causes respiratory irritation for people. So the source of knowing whether those fish kills are actually associated with brevetoxin would be to look at the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, because they handle all of the brevetoxin kind of quantification in the state to know whether it's associated with the red tide or not. So that would be the best source.
The map on their website too.
Yes.
Another question is, have there been any studies about the fish populations themselves when this happens? Some of them, the pelagics, the mackerel, we didn't see any dead mackerel, and there have been a lot in the area. Did they move? But we did see some speckled trout, shiners. We saw a horseshoe. We saw a freshwater gar. Some
Yeah,
odd
so I
fish?
think the population level dynamics are something that we still need a lot more science associated with that. I can tell you further south in and around Fort Myers and Sanibel, where they are getting hit again and again and again by red tide. It's chronically, like annually. Anecdotally, people will tell you that they're seeing different types of shells on the beaches and that they rarely catch certain species of fish. And I think there's fundamentally the food web is being changed in those locations because red tide in particular is getting significantly more intense and longer lasting. So it's persistent year after year effects hitting those populations and hitting different species at different times in their life because it's occurring all year round now in South Florida. Up further north, it's very likely that those populations of different fish are going to be able to bounce back because it's in a single year, it's kind of a short episodic event. But if it starts to increase in sort of frequency and severity, I think that's where we really need to start paying attention to whether there are population level effects. Definitely. And and so one of the things that we're working on I'll just say one last thing, in our center is working on basically the coastal circulation that would dictate when you have Carenia, when you have these red tide blooms that actually move up north and start affecting the nature coast in the Big Bend of Florida. And when we're likely to see, these blooms, when they bloom, continue to stay south. What are those kind of key predictors of the ocean current that would let you know with what frequency and duration would we likely see red tide affecting these kind of more northern Gulf situations? So this is an active area of research and questions that we have and are trying to work on building the capability to be able to do that in the next few years. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. Greg Young. John Gregory touched on my question I was going to ask. Basically, inland waterways, the bodies of water like the Caloosahatchee River, you mentioned earlier, and Lake Okeechobee, which feeds it, and issues with that. Then we also see our springs are being affected, so we know our groundwater is being affected.
Yes.
So that is kind of like, as you said, the source of things that end up in coastal. So are you addressing that through partnerships like with Springs Institute up in High Springs with Dr. Bob Knight and organizations such as that?
So we have to have these kind of, it's like a watershed to ocean sort of effort. And I think this is like, it's going to have to be an all hands on deck type of response. We need to have at a state level to basically clean up our waterways from the headwaters, basically all the way to the coast. And so absolutely, in the case of the Caloosahatchee, we're working really closely with the Army Corps of Engineers and starting to basically lay the groundwork for working with stakeholders that are managing lands that ultimately drain to the lake, that drains to the Caloosahatchee River, that comes to the coast. But we're not going to solve our coastal problems with basically a Band-Aid at the coast. It's not possible. And this is why working on these problems and using these high-powered data analytics is going to be really important because we need to know which upstream sources of, say, nutrients do we need to address first? Which ones are the biggest priority for us to invest in now so that we see like longer term benefits, and which ones are, maybe going to cost too much and not be a result in the sort of the downstream benefits that we really care about. But I think this is going to be something that it's got to come from the individual homeowner level, from the individual community level, from private industry, and saying we're going to do our part to reduce our own nutrient loading so that there's a collective benefit for the greater whole. And it's a big mentality shift, I think, for how we do things at a sort of from like I said, from the individual homeowner to the broader state scale. Yeah, but we need to provide the science to suggest that it's possible to make improvements and to demonstrate what the key sources are that have to get addressed before we improve. So we're really, I think that's what we critically see as our role is and provide that sort of state-of-the-art science needed to support decision-making and investments. Yeah.
Thank you, Jacob Atem. Great presentation. Mine have a couple questions. It's not too difficult like my colleagues is, but you mentioned using SAS, and I believe one of our member here, actually, Tony Barr, worked many years ago. I believe he's one of the co-founder of SAS. So I wonder, do you only use SAS to analyze your data, or do you use SPSS or Stata, or it doesn't really matter? It's just
So so we're working with. I'll give a little bit more context. So there's a data analytics company. It's called SAS, and they're based out of North Carolina, co-founded by somebody that came from the University of Florida, and this is a company that we've worked with in large part because they have a long-standing relationship with many of the major agencies in Florida. So the Department of Health, the Department of Children's Services, the Department of Environmental Protection. This is an entity that goes and vacuums data for all our major sort of state agencies and does basic analytics. They've been doing a lot of the COVID dashboards. In the context of our center, we've been partnering with them because they're far more efficient than our students and faculty are at going and vacuuming and cleaning data for us. So they compile it into sort of clean databases from all those different sources that I mentioned in Piney Point and additional sources of data. They're ingesting those and making them clean and ready for us to do analytics on. So we're doing all our own statistics, all of our own sort of code and model development. That's kind of what our real sweet spot is. But SAS is basically handing us over data products, but they've been a key accelerator of our progress.
And final comment is, or question is, can you elaborate more on public-private sector? I see Deloitte there, and not to judge is my perception of what Deloitte do and how they fit into your model. Could you kind of elaborate on that relationship? Sure. Thanks.
Yeah, so Deloitte, one of our board members is a Deloitte. He's very high up. He's a partner at Deloitte, and so he's brought them in to help us basically in our program strategy, literally, and how do we grow our program from the ground up? What kind of board members do we need to provide advice? How do we structure our program? So they've been working with us in a consulting capacity and a pro bono basis to build our programs in that capacity. So it's been extremely helpful for an academic institution. I'm a faculty member with experience in research, as Susan mentioned in my overview, to have somebody from a business management perspective come in and help us give us some guidance. So that's how we've been working with Deloitte so far. And opening my eyes as the director of this center, and how do we take more of a kind of a blended model of university-based system that has some business elements that we can build something that's scalable and can actually be as impactful as we want to be. So thanks.
Hi, Wilbur Holloway. We're about 6 months out from the Piney Point spill. Do you have an assessment of what the impact was on Tampa Bay?
Sure. Yeah. So, so what happened, there's a sort of a cascade of events that happened, which is really fascinating for me as a sort of biologist and somebody that studies natural systems and how they respond to different events. So very briefly, I'll give you the kind of sequence of events. So right after the Piney Point spill, almost as soon as the nutrients sort of from the discharge pipe hit the water, we started to see a bloom of phytoplankton, not toxic phytoplankton, but something called diatom, a diatom bloom. So really hyperproductive. And then basically that bloom sort of quieted down, and there was sort of a quiet period where we didn't see a whole lot of kind of biological response. Then a little bit further sort of south in Sarasota, there was something called a Lingbia, which is this big, we call it a macroalgae, but it's essentially seaweed that grows in the water column. And it looks like brown snot. It's really disgusting, but there was a huge Lingbia bloom in that region that was attributed to making a bunch of dogs sick, and it's a toxic type of bloom. The Lingbia bloom died back. Then there was a whole bunch of red tide that sort of proliferated in Tampa Bay. So there's another phytoplankton bloom. And now we have a green algae bloom. So this has been basically a system that was, when we look at historical data of what was happening in the system, and like I told you, Tampa Bay was this like environmental success story and doing so well. And now basically the ecological dynamics have just gotten knocked out of whack in a variety of different directions. So, all right, I want to let everybody be able to go. And
Dr. Angelini, Christine, thank you so much for, again, a very just excellent presentation, really. Dr. Angelini and I were speaking briefly before the meeting, and kind of, so who's the crowd? What do we have here? She's normally presenting to scientists and folks. We're not scientists. We are business people, but we're also a lot of water sports and outdoors enthusiasts. Ed Ellett spoke, Doug Wilcox back there. So yeah, your message was right on. So I'd say you're an excellent communicator, not a moderate one. Thank you for everything that you're doing for the environment, for our beautiful state, with your colleagues at the Center for Coastal Solutions and your colleagues at UF. Quickly, I'll just tell you, Rotary International, we have 7 areas of focus. I think I mentioned this to you also, that actually water and sanitation is one, and also the environment is another. So you were right on with us. Thank you so much. Another round of applause, please, for Dr. Angelini. A little bit more, Dr. Angelini. I've got a token for you here to commemorate your time and your efforts. This presentation she prepared for us. This isn't something that she does monthly to a bunch of different organizations. She put some time into this. So we have a 4-way test that we as Rotarians run by everything we think, say, or do in our dealings with each other and our dealings with other folks in the community, locally and worldwide. And it starts with, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? And will it be beneficial to all concerned? And on the front, we actually have our motto, service above self. So thank you again so much. Everybody, next week, we've got my man, Feastmaster Jay Nordquist is going to be running the show, and he's going to be unveiling the recipient of funds generated from the 2022 Wild Game Feast. So that's going to be a great program. I hope you guys can come back and join us for that one. The last 3 digits of our drawing for 50/50. Chase, what's the 50/50 for? Rotary Reading Safari. We've got 917. Thanks, everybody. See you guys next week.